Samuel Cross smiled bitterly. Why was he already encountering such situations upon arrival? Did he have to pick sides right from the beginning? He had joined a cultivation sect purely to acquire cultivation techniques and had no interest in such petty disputes. Suddenly, someone in the crowd coldly said, "Silence." The voice wasn't loud nor particularly stern. Samuel Cross didn't even see who had spoken, yet the two men immediately fell silent, lowering their heads. Could it be someone from the White family? Samuel Cross wondered, then obediently stood at the end of the line. After half a day, a Foundation Establishment stage senior arrived, gliding on a banana leaf, landing gracefully in front of the new disciples of Azure Pill sect. He had a refined and scholarly appearance. He first scanned the group of new disciples before addressing the green-robed scholar in charge of recruiting. "Junior brother, have we recruited any disciples with good aptitude today? I'm in need of a disciple to assist me." The green-robed scholar chuckled and replied, "Your requirements are too strict. Why would an assistant need exceptional aptitude? Today, there are only two with good aptitude, one from the Turner family and another from the White family. Would you dare take either of them as an assistant?" After saying this, the green-robed scholar laughed at his own words. The senior sighed and said, "Fine. I'll look for one myself tomorrow." With that, he cast a spell toward the banana leaf hovering midair. Miraculously, the banana leaf, initially only 3 or 4 feet wide, suddenly expanded, transforming into a large boat in the blink of an eye. Everyone watched in awe. This was the true essence of cultivation. At this moment, the young man turned to the group of new disciples and said, "I am your martial Uncle Turner, and now I will take you to the sect. Everyone, get on the boat." After speaking, he flew to the front of the boat. It was only then that everyone came to their senses, performed their salutes one by one, and jumped onto the boat. The rogue cultivators laughed. Behind in the open field, who were not accepted into the sect, looked on enviously. Being admitted into a sect marked the true beginning of the path to immortality. The large boat soared swiftly through the sky, clouds drifting past, and the sound of the wind howling in their ears. Samuel Cross tensed up, even though he knew it was impossible to fall off. The others felt much the same, both nervous and excited. The boat carried them quickly away from Stonehaven City, crossing over endless mountain ranges. Within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, they saw a grand and magnificent cluster of palaces and pavilions nestled among the mountains. These structures were intricately adorned with jade and gems, exuding luxury, while countless cultivators flew gracefully through the air. None of them had ever witnessed such a scene before and were left dumbfounded. The young man lightly tapped his foot, and the large boat tilted downward, descending toward a plaza amidst the architectural marvels. This, it seemed, was the Azure Pill sect. As soon as they landed, everyone leaped off the boat, curiously observing their surroundings. Those who knew each other chatted excitedly, clearly brimming with enthusiasm. Suddenly, a young girl in green robes came running over. "Nathan, you're back." The moment Samuel Cross heard this voice, he froze. He recognized it. Turning his head to look, sure enough, it was Emily Turner. When had she joined the Azure Pill sect? The young man affectionately patted Emily Turner on the head and smiled. "Yes, I'm back. Today's recruitment didn't yield any particularly talented disciples. I was hoping to find you a junior brother or sister, but I'll have to try again tomorrow." Emily Turner had already started examining the new disciples. Not wanting to face her, Samuel Cross immediately hid behind a large man. Unexpectedly, Emily Turner's sharp eyes spotted him at a glance. She suddenly tilted her head in a playful manner and said to the young man, "Nathan, you promised to let me manage the herb garden. Can I pick one of these people to be my assistant?" The young man readily agreed and turned to the group. "Hey! Stand still. Let my little sister choose someone. Working with me is far better than being assigned to any of the other martial uncles or martial aunts." Everyone had already overheard their conversation. Tending the herb garden was no easy task. Medicinal herbs were precious, each with its own preferences and attributes. Accidentally killing one or two rare plants could jeopardize their future. As a result, although they stood straight, none of them dared to meet Emily Turner's gaze. Emily Turner pretended to glance over the group a few times before pointing at Samuel Cross. "You. Step forward. Stop hiding, it's you." The young man was also observing everyone at this moment. He knew that managing medicinal herbs wasn't easy, so his gaze lingered on the older cultivators who seemed more mature. Unexpectedly, his little sister chose a young man around his age. The young man felt somewhat reluctant but couldn't bear to go against his sister's wishes, so he asked Samuel Cross, "Hey, do you know how to cultivate medicinal herbs?" Samuel Cross immediately lowered his head and replied, "Senior, I confess I am illiterate and merely a rough man, unknowledgeable about medicinal herbs." The young man was very satisfied. This kid knew his place. He nodded and said, "Oh, I see. Well then." Before he could finish his sentence, Emily Turner exclaimed, "It doesn't matter. It's him. It's him." The young man gave a wry smile and had no choice but to nod, "All right. All right." Then he turned to Samuel Cross and said, "Follow your senior sister to the herb garden. I'll have your belongings sent there later." Samuel Cross dared not object, so he lowered his head in agreement and followed the green-clad girl. The other disciples all gave Samuel Cross sympathetic looks as they saw him off. This brother was bound to have a tough time ahead. That young lady was none other than the famously capricious Miss Turner. Passing through rows of maze-like structures, the number of passers-by gradually thinned. Emily Turner, walking ahead, suddenly turned around and asked Samuel Cross, "What's your name?" Samuel Cross replied, "Samuel Cross." Emily Turner nodded and continued walking. After a while, she spoke again, "Don't worry. No one knows about this. It's our little secret." Samuel Cross said, "Thank you." Not long after, the two arrived at an herb garden. Outside the garden was a thin barrier, making it impossible to see what was inside. Emily Turner took out a jade token and pressed it against the barrier. The barrier flickered a few times before a large, door-shaped opening appeared. She waved at Samuel Cross and then stepped through the barrier herself. As soon as Samuel Cross entered the barrier, the door-shaped opening disappeared. Emily Turner smiled and said, "All right, now it's just the two of us in the herb garden. You don't need to be so formal." Samuel Cross replied, "Understood." He had already started glancing around with a not-so-innocent expression. At this moment, he felt very fortunate that Emily Turner had brought him here. The sheer quantity of medicinal herbs here was beyond his imagination. He had already begun planning to transfer all of them into his atlas of mountains and rivers. Emily Turner looked at Samuel Cross's sly eyes and smiled lightly, saying, "Hey, don't even think about messing with these medicinal herbs. They've all been carefully accounted for. If even one is missing, you'll have to compensate. And if you can't afford it, don't blame me for skinning you alive." Samuel Cross, in a great mood at the moment, couldn't help teasing her, "We're comrades who have faced life and death together. How about you turn a blind eye and let me dig up a few?" Emily Turner blushed and said, This, if you only dig up the less rare ones." As she spoke, she lowered her head even further. Samuel Cross had only been joking, but hearing Emily Turner's response, he was stunned. Seriously? Is she actually okay with this? He carefully studied the young woman in front of him. Her arched brows, long lashes, petite and delicate nose, and rosy lips, this face would undoubtedly become that of a stunning beauty in a few years. Someone like her surely couldn't be foolish. Emily Turner lowered her head even more. Suddenly, a thought crossed Samuel Cross's mind. He immediately sighed and said, "That day, I acted in self-defense, and saving you was just a coincidence. You don't need to dwell on it too much. Besides, you've already given me an entry jade token." Samuel Cross was convinced that Emily Turner's behavior stemmed from gratitude for him saving her life. Emily Turner abruptly lifted her head and said, "I Samuel Cross waved his hand dismissively and said, yes, I understand. Since senior sister has brought me here, you should at least show your junior brother around. Where am I supposed to stay? As Emily Turner walked off, Samuel Cross quickly grabbed the jade hoe and jade shovel leaning against the wall and dashed out of the house. As he ran, his heart screamed with excitement. Medicinal herbs, here I come. 1 medicinal herb, 2 medicinal herbs. 3 medicinal herbs, for medicinal herbs. In the herb field, Samuel Cross, drooling with excitement, dug furiously with his shovel, leaving a large patch of the herb field in complete disarray. #### Chapter 11, the 11th episode, Troubles. Selena Fox looked on, her head filled with black lines, and urgently shouted, Stop. Stop. Why are you digging so much? What if someone barges in? Samuel Cross halted his actions, chuckling awkwardly before responding, Sorry. I got carried away in the moment and couldn't control myself. Thinking about how he was about to have so many spiritual herbs, Samuel Cross couldn't help but laugh even in his dreams, losing all composure. Today was the full moon. Samuel Cross was in an excellent mood, as it was his day off. With so many herbs in the garden, he had gathered enough ingredients for several alchemical recipes he had collected earlier. He had long been eager to start refining pills. Are you Samuel Cross? As soon as Samuel Cross stepped out of the herb garden, 2 people blocked his way. Samuel Cross was somewhat bewildered. Ever since joining the sect, apart from attending a single lecture by the elder, he had never left the herb garden. Why were people looking for him now? Moreover, the 2 individuals wore hostile expressions, clearly intending to cause trouble. Yes, I am Samuel Cross. May I ask what guidance you 2 senior brothers have for me? Samuel Cross greeted them with a bow. Oh. So he's come out? Another voice rang out. Following the voice, 4 more people hurried over, immediately surrounding Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross's expression shifted slightly. He realized something was amiss. A young man, taller than Samuel Cross by a head and with a robust build, spoke up, Samuel Cross. Tell me, what trick did you use to make my cousin visit this herb garden every day? Samuel Cross was stunned. His cousin? He instantly understood who they were here for and smiled bitterly, saying, Senior brothers, senior sister Turner is helping the elder manage the herb garden. I am merely a laborer here. The burly young man snorted coldly, Humph. Stop pretending. My cousin used to barely visit the herb garden once a month, but recently, she's been coming constantly. Today, I asked her why she wasn't going, and she said, Samuel Cross has the day off today. Humph. As he spoke, he grabbed Samuel Cross and lifted him off the ground. Samuel Cross still wanted to explain. Bang! A massive fist slammed into his face. Samuel Cross was stunned. He never expected someone within the sect to dare attack him. This burly young man had tremendous strength. If it had been 6 months ago, just this one punch would have shattered half his face. As Samuel Cross was about to curse loudly, the grip on the back of his neck loosened. The young man released him and delivered a straight kick to his stomach. This time, Samuel Cross was prepared. He crossed his hands in front of his abdomen, blocking the kick, but the powerful force still sent him flying, crashing into the protective barrier of the herb garden. The barrier rippled like water upon impact. The young man didn't advance further, he merely spat on the ground and said coldly, Don't be a toad dreaming of eating swan meat. Immediately give up your position in the herb garden and get as far away as possible. Otherwise, don't blame me for not showing mercy. With that, he led his group away arrogantly. Samuel Cross sat on the ground, rubbing his face. His cheek was slightly swollen. At this moment, Selena Fox ran over and asked, Hey, are you okay? Samuel Cross shook his head and smiled, I'm fine. It's just a superficial wound. Selena Fox, a bit angry, said, Humph. Why didn't you teach them a lesson? After all, they were the ones who attacked first. I don't believe they'd be able to escape the binding, immortal rope barehanded. Samuel Cross looked up at the sky and sighed, "Ah, what a shame to ruin my good mood." After gazing at the sky for a moment, he slowly got up and said, "Let's go, time to refine some pills. This time I'll definitely make more than you." Samuel Cross. Emily Turner cheerfully ran into the herb garden. However, upon entering, she didn't see Samuel Cross but instead her cousin, Nathan Turner. She paused for a moment before smiling and saying, "Ah, Nathan. Today isn't the scheduled inspection day, why are you here?" Nathan Turner smiled and said, "This is my herb garden. Are you saying you get to decide when I can come here?" He stepped forward and patted Emily Turner's head. At that moment, Samuel Cross emerged from a wooden house. Emily Turner was about to greet him, but when she saw his face, she froze in shock. What happened to your face?" One side of Samuel Cross's face was red and swollen, with one eye puffed up so much it was barely a slit. Samuel Cross moved his lips, attempting to smile, but failing due to the pain. He explained, I accidentally got some emerald vine sap on me. You know, that stuff is toxic." He wasn't lying, while handling herbs, he had accidentally splashed a bit of the sap on himself. Since there was already a wound on his face, it swelled up like this. Before Emily Turner could say anything, Samuel Cross handed a jade token to Nathan Turner, bowed slightly, and walked out. Yesterday, he had already requested to leave the herb garden. Emily Turner stood there, stunned, and shouted loudly, "Samuel Cross! Where are you going?" Nathan Turner sighed and said, "Little sister. He said he didn't like staying in the herb garden, so I let him go." In truth, Nathan Turner had already guessed a bit about the situation. However, matters involving the younger generation were not something he felt it appropriate to meddle in, especially since the one responsible was likely someone from their own family. To make amends, he had given Samuel Cross an extra month's salary as compensation. Emily Turner didn't bother listening to all of Nathan Turner's words. The moment she saw Samuel Cross leaving the herb garden, she immediately chased after him. Samuel Cross, of course, heard the commotion behind him. Feeling slightly annoyed, he thought to himself, why didn't Uncle Turner stop this senior sister of mine? Nonetheless, he didn't continue walking but instead stopped in his tracks. Catching up to him, Emily Turner asked, "Why are you suddenly leaving the herb garden? When you first arrived, you were clearly very happy." Samuel Cross smiled and said, "What's so strange about that? Maybe I got some emerald vine sap on me, and now I can't stand the herb garden anymore." Emily Turner reached out her hand, intending to touch the swollen part of Samuel Cross's face. Startled, Samuel Cross thought, "This is bad. If anyone sees this, it'll just bring me more trouble." He immediately stepped back several paces, waving his hands and saying, "Don't touch it. It hurts a lot." Emily Turner froze in place. Why was Samuel Cross reacting so strongly? She looked down at the ground, confused. All she had done was reach out her hand, yet Samuel Cross had retreated 7 or 8 paces away. Suddenly, Emily Turner seemed to understand. She stared at Samuel Cross intently and asked in a low voice, "Is your face like that because of me?" Samuel Cross shook his head vigorously, like a rattle drum. Emily Turner pressed further, "Then who?" Samuel Cross gave a bitter smile, clasped his hands together, and said, "Senior sister, I have to go take on a new task. Please excuse me." With that, he turned and ran off without looking back. "Oh? Samuel Cross?" The plump man in charge of assigning chores at the hall attendant glanced at Samuel Cross's identification token, sizing him up from head to toe. After a moment, he shook his head and said, "Nope. There's no vacancy in the library pavilion or the alchemy room." Samuel Cross pointed at the bulletin board and said, "Doesn't it say up there that they're short on people?" The plump man, growing impatient, replied, "I said there's nothing available, so there's nothing available. In this sect, there's also the Ascension Hall. Have you ever seen anyone walk in there and ascend?" Samuel Cross remained silent. The fat man thought for a moment and then said, Now you have two choices, either go to the mines or to the forest grounds. Choose one. Samuel Cross knew for sure that someone was secretly trying to harm him. However, he kept a calm face and asked, "What are the forest grounds like?" The fat man pointed toward the horizon. "Over there. There's a vast scarletwood forest. Scarletwood trees are ordinary trees, losing 10 or 8 of them doesn't matter, they're the easiest to manage. A regular forest that required someone like him, a cultivator, to manage?" Samuel Cross felt frustrated. But he guessed that the mines would be even more challenging than the forest grounds, so he nodded and said, "Fine, I'll go to the forest grounds. Senior brother, please register me for it." As Samuel Cross left, a figure emerged from the back hall of the hall attendant. It was the burly young man Samuel Cross had met before. The fat man grinned and said, "Big brother, what do you think? That desolate place like the forest grounds, there's no benefit to be had, and he won't meet anyone for an entire year." The burly young man stared at Samuel Cross's fading silhouette and gave a cold smile. "Good. If he requests a transfer, make sure to suppress it. Let him rot there for the rest of his life." After walking for half a day, Samuel Cross finally arrived at the edge of what was called the forest grounds. The Azure Pill sect was far behind him now. But he was soon stunned by the sight before him. Were these really just ordinary trees? Countless towering trees stood proudly, their trunks so massive it would take several people to encircle one, reaching high into the clouds. Standing beneath their shade made him feel insignificant. Samuel Cross's gloomy mood dissipated. Using both his hands and feet, he climbed one of the largest-looking trees. The higher he climbed, the higher he wanted to go. This giant tree was over 30 meters tall, and the buildings of the Azure Pill sect in the distance looked like tiny blocks. Selena Fox, at that moment, sighed, "Such tall trees. Who would have thought ordinary trees could grow this massive?" Samuel Cross said, "For them to grow this tall, they must have lived for a long time. Even many spiritual herbs can't last this long. I want to plant a patch of them in the mountain and river diagram and see what they'll look like after a few years." Selena Fox suddenly said, "Someone's coming." Samuel Cross froze, but quickly spotted it too. In the distance, a streak of green light appeared in the forest, flying low and skimming over the treetops. Samuel Cross soon recognized the figure in the green light. It was Emily Turner. As the light approached, Samuel Cross shouted, "Hey! Up here!" Deep inside, Samuel Cross felt envious. Having a flying artifact was truly convenient. He had walked for half a day, yet she had arrived in just moments. Emily Turner heard a sound and looked up, seeing Samuel Cross on the giant tree. She was momentarily stunned before swiftly maneuvering her light to fly up. Before Samuel Cross could speak, Emily Turner scolded, "Climbing so high, do you have no regard for your life?" Samuel Cross smiled and, sitting on a branch, replied, "You're flying even higher than me. If you're not afraid, why should I be?" Emily Turner cautiously stood on a branch, hesitated for a while, and then sat down not far from Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross truly was a strange person. She always found conversations with him enjoyable, yet every time she recalled them, she realized he had barely said much. Now was no different. She had been filled with sadness and disappointment, but upon meeting him, everything seemed to fade away. Looking down at the vast forest beneath her, Emily Turner spoke, "I know, someone must be giving you trouble. Tell me who they are." Samuel Cross smiled and said, "Since you already know, I hope no one noticed you coming here this time." Emily Turner, slightly irritated, replied, "What are you afraid of? I'll come if I want to. If they dare to bother you again, ####Chapter 12, a beast?" Samuel Cross shook his head and said, "I can't kill them. I can only avoid them for now." Emily Turner was startled. In a low voice, she said, "No one saw me. I just said I was going to the herb garden." "That's right, he dared to kill others, even Victor White, so how could he fear anyone else?" He simply didn't want to cause trouble. Thinking of this, Emily Turner's mood suddenly improved. 3 years later. Samuel Cross stood looking at the fallen scarletwood tree in front of him. This scarletwood was another towering giant over 30 meters tall. He couldn't understand why every time there was a thunderstorm, trees like this would fall. Samuel Cross felt regretful. He had asked Emily Turner to bring him various records and guides, but the information on this type of tree was always minimal, summed up in just 4 words, big but useless. Could something that grew so large and lived so long truly have no purpose? Samuel Cross. A feminine voice rang in his ears, clear and melodious, like an Oriole's song. The moment he heard this voice, Samuel Cross knew it was Emily Turner. Over the past 3 years, she had been his only visitor. Emily Turner had now become graceful and charming, no longer showing any trace of the naive girl from 3 years ago. She was now a stunning beauty. Samuel Cross turned around and smiled, saying, "Seeing your sister." He had only spoken halfway when his expression suddenly changed. His right hand spread out, and several fireballs shot toward Emily Turner. Startled, Emily Turner quickly dodged, and the fireballs hit something behind her. A roaring sound immediately echoed. She turned her head and saw that behind her, at some unknown point, a humanoid monster had appeared. It was as small as a newborn baby, and seemed to have grown out of the giant tree, its legs still attached to the trunk. At that moment, it was using branch-like arms to shield its head. Samuel Cross's fireballs had just struck its eyes. Emily Turner landed beside Samuel Cross, her face pale with shock as she stammered, "What happened?" Samuel Cross kept his eyes fixed on the strange creature ahead. Shaking his head, he replied, "It suddenly emerged from the tree trunk and tried to ambush you from behind. I thought it followed you here." Emily Turner drew her frost crystal blade and remarked, "It somewhat resembles a forest spirit." Forest spirits were rare entities, plants that had gained sentience. Unlike animals or humans, plants lacked the 9 apertures of perception. At that moment, the forest spirit curled up and vanished back into the tree trunk in an instant. Samuel Cross's expression shifted, and he lunged forward, dagger in hand, slashing horizontally at the massive tree where the forest spirit had disappeared. Nothing. There was nothing there, just a stump oozing sap. Samuel Cross moved swiftly to another nearby tree and struck again. Emily Turner, still confused, watched as Samuel Cross methodically chopped down every tree in the vicinity and incinerated them into ashes with fireballs. Only then did she realize his intent. He feared the forest spirit might reappear from another tree. Standing back to back with Samuel Cross, she asked, "Have you never encountered something like this before?" His actions gave her a surprising sense of reassurance. Samuel Cross shook his head calmly. "Never." He then summoned a bronze shield in front of him. The dagger and bronze shield were his only magical weapons. The forest spirit had revealed no trace of its aura earlier, leaving him unable to gauge its true strength. It was better to stay cautious. As for the immortal binding rope, he didn't even consider using it. Being wood elemental, the rope would be ineffective against a creature that could meld with wood. Worse, if the forest spirit managed to seize it, things could become problematic. Emily Turner also summoned a silver shield. Suddenly, a dark figure darted out from the forest, a vine whip lashing fiercely toward Samuel Cross. He immediately maneuvered the bronze shield to block the attack, simultaneously slashing at the vine with his dagger. The bronze shield dented under the impact, but the vine was severed. Emily Turner, meanwhile, directed her frost crystal blade toward the shadowy figure. With a dull thud, the frost crystal blade plunged into the creature's body up to its hilt. A thin layer of frost formed over the monster. Both of them exhaled in relief. It seemed that while the creature was strong, its defenses were lacking. Samuel Cross spread his fingers and launched several fireballs. Roar! A furious growl echoed as the forest spirit's body suddenly radiated a layer of spiritual light, deflecting all of Samuel's fireballs. It then extended its branch-like arm, grabbing the hilt of the frost crystal blade and yanking it out before hurling it far away. The frost crystal blade spun through the air, landing out of reach. This is not an ordinary forest spirit, you must be careful. A gentle voice suddenly reached Samuel Cross's ears. Samuel Cross, who was about to make his move, froze. It was Selena Fox's voice. At that moment, the forest spirit's body suddenly expanded, and a thin layer of wooden armor grew over its body. Before the two could react, layers upon layers of armor sprouted from the forest spirit, quickly transforming it into a humanoid monster over 10 feet tall. Emily Turner glanced at Samuel Cross. Although she had already reached the peak of spirit refining level 12, she subconsciously felt that Samuel Cross was more formidable, even though he was only at spirit refining level 11. Staring intently at the forest spirit, Samuel Cross said, "Senior sister, where's your flying artifact? Activate it, and let's leave." Although Emily Turner found it odd that they weren't going to fight the forest spirit, she still followed Samuel Cross's words. She took out a green circular disc, tossed it into the air, and cast a spell on it. The disc glowed with spiritual light, spun rapidly, and expanded to the size of a table. Emily Turner leapt onto the disc and said, "All right, get on." Samuel Cross spread his hands, and 10 fiery lights appeared at his fingertips. Hearing that it was ready, he immediately swung his hands, sending 10 blazing fireballs hurtling toward the forest spirit, igniting a burst of flames. At the same time, his body flipped mid-air and landed lightly on the green disc. As soon as Emily Turner saw Samuel Cross steady himself, she urged the disc to flee. However, amidst the flames, several long vines shot out in an instant, viciously lashing at the disc. The disc flickered with unstable light, wobbling as if it might collapse. Samuel Cross's expression darkened. He snatched the frost crystal blade from Emily Turner's hands and slashed at the vines, severing them. In a low voice, he said, "Go quickly. You focus on flying, I'll cover the rear." With that, he swung the blade twice more, cutting down 2 additional vines that had appeared. Emily Turner froze for a moment when her frost crystal blade was taken. "He's using my frost crystal blade." Her emotions were a mixed jumble, but Samuel Cross's urgent command snapped her back to reality. She quickly controlled the green disc to ascend and speed forward. Slash! 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 The sword light in Samuel Cross's hand never ceased. By now, the disc was dozens of feet above the ground, but the strange forest spirit continued moving swiftly among the giant trees, relentlessly sending vines to lash at the disc beneath the two of them. Samuel Cross knew they would only be safe once they escaped the forest. After all, Emily Turner was not a Foundation establishment cultivator, and carrying another person while flying at such a height was already pushing her limits. As they gradually approached the forest's edge, Samuel Cross hadn't even had time to breathe a sigh of relief when he suddenly heard Emily Turner let out a soft cry. Alarmed, Samuel Cross immediately asked, "What happened?" He had been doing his best to prevent the forest spirit's vines from striking the disc, but maneuvering in midair was tricky. Could it be that Emily Turner had been hit? Emily Turner exclaimed in horror, "Ahead, ahead! There are so many demonic beasts." Samuel Cross kept his gaze fixed on the demon tree in the distance. Hearing Emily Turner's words, he immediately looked around. All he could see in every direction, both on the ground and in the air, were demonic beasts surging like a tide toward Azure Pale Sect. In other directions, he also saw his fellow disciples fleeing in panic. Seeing this scene, Samuel Cross's expression changed, but he quickly spoke in a deep voice, "Don't panic. Fly toward the sect's center. The elders and grandmasters are there." He began rummaging through his storage pouch, which contained dozens of immortal binding chains. If these demonic creatures attacked, he could at least delay them for a while. Hearing Samuel Cross's calm voice, Emily Turner's terror subsided somewhat. She nodded and directed the flying disc toward the sect. Spiritual energy surged around Samuel Cross, ready to act at any moment. He thought to himself, "Selena, do you know what's going on? There are so many demonic beasts." After a long moment, Selena Fox's voice finally responded, "Not sure. But the behavior of these beasts seems strange, as if something has provoked them. Try your best to avoid engaging them." Samuel Cross acknowledged with a brief response, frowning as he focused on observing his surroundings. Dong. 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 3 melodious chimes suddenly echoed from the main hall of Azure Pill sect. Following this, a surge of spiritual light flashed, and an enormous pale blue barrier abruptly appeared, encompassing the main structures at the sect's center. Both Samuel Cross and Emily Turner were overjoyed at the sight. The sect's grand protective array had been activated. The two quickly approached the glowing barrier and immediately passed through it. Both carried tokens issued by the sect, allowing them entry, while the demonic beasts chasing after them were blocked outside, unable to advance further. Azure Pill sect was in chaos. The elders floated in midair, coldly observing the demonic beasts attacking the barrier. Meanwhile, the lower-ranking disciples stared at the relentless assault with expressions of fear. Some screamed, some stood frozen like statues, and others whispered anxiously among themselves, creating a commotion louder than a marketplace. Upon entering the barrier, Samuel Cross separated from Emily Turner. He had no desire to get entangled in unnecessary trouble. "Humph. I've only been in seclusion for 20 years, and yet the sect's disciples have become so unruly?" A cold voice rang out above the crowd. Though not loud, it carried an air of authority. As the voice echoed, a white figure shot out from behind the row of buildings, hovering in midair. "Greetings to the sect master." Several long-standing disciples, or those with sharp perception, immediately recognized the figure as their sect master, Lucas Reed. Samuel Cross looked up at the figure in the air. The man was clad in white robes that billowed despite the absence of wind. Though his hair and beard were completely white, his face appeared youthful, resembling someone in their 30s. In his hand, he held a long sword 3 feet in length, its blade faintly glowing with flashes of light. He hovered there effortlessly, exuding an aura of dominance over all beings. This was the demeanor of a true cultivator. Such transcendent presence could only be achieved after centuries of cultivation. Hashtag Chapter 13, The 13th Trial, Desperate Test. Alright. Lucas Reed nodded and said, "Who is maintaining the formation? Withdraw immediately and let those demons in." As soon as he spoke, everyone was stunned. What? Let the demons in? The Foundation establishment stage uncles and elders could still manage, but the lower-level disciples were so terrified that some collapsed onto the ground. Those monsters were already so aggressive outside the grand formation, if they were let in. Yes. A reply echoed from an unknown source. The surrounding barriers quickly disappeared, and strange, bizarre-looking beasts surged in from all directions, filling their view. These creatures came in all shapes and forms. Some resembled hornless water buffalo, others looked like fish without scales, and some resembled lizards but had wings. Truly a variety of odd and peculiar forms, leaving nothing out. Samuel Cross observed these beasts. Most of them were no different from wild animals, except they carried traces of spiritual power. He had thought demons were rare and extraordinary beings, but today he saw so many. He drew his dagger once again. The nerves of the lower-level disciples were pushed to their limits. Some cried bitterly, disregarding the sect leader's presence. Some fainted on the spot, while others, like Samuel Cross, though pale-faced, still drew their weapons. Lucas Reed hovered in midair, coldly observing the disciples' reactions. After a while, he let out a faint scoff. Only a handful of disciples managed to stay calm. It seemed the newly admitted disciples had been overly pampered. The Foundation establishment disciples floating nearby also turned to the sect leader, awaiting orders. Although the beasts were numerous, only a few were truly powerful. If the sect leader gave the command, they could easily wipe them out. Lucas Reed's expression remained icy. Slowly, he raised the long sword in his hand. Samuel Cross felt a stirring in his heart and suddenly looked up. At the moment the sect leader raised his sword, he sensed a surge of immense spiritual power. Even the surrounding heavenly energy seemed to shift. Then, a loud, resonant voice echoed in everyone's ears, "Heaven and earth possess righteous energy, which manifests in myriad forms. Below, it flows as rivers and mountains, above, it shines as sun and stars." Each word struck heavily, resonating deep within their hearts. Samuel Cross staggered back half a step, his face pale. How formidable! Even the recitation of a spell carried such overwhelming power. As Lucas Reed chanted, the longsword in his hand let out a resonant hum, radiating a blinding light. With a raised brow, Lucas Reed swung the longsword in all directions. Slash! 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 Wherever the sword energy reached, the demons were powerless to resist, all severed in two. In mere moments, hundreds of beasts were annihilated by the sect leader. The air was immediately filled with the thick stench of blood. Some disciples bent over and vomited. Samuel Cross, though his stomach churned, managed to hold it in. At this moment, he was filled with admiration and yearning. This was true cultivation. To command thunder and storms, to come and go without a trace. Lucas Reed coldly surveyed the disciples and suddenly spoke. Michael Ford, a Foundation establishment disciple hovering in midair, immediately responded respectfully, "Michael Ford is here." Lucas Reed said coldly, "Expel all the disciples who vomited from the sect. They are unworthy of cultivation." Michael Ford respectfully replied, "Understood." Lucas Reed continued, "Philip Hunter." Another disciple, floating midair, responded, "Philip Hunter is present." Lucas Reed commanded, "You go investigate what these demons are about. Handle everything at your discretion, no need to report every single detail." Philip Hunter respectfully replied, "Understood." Lucas Reed glanced coldly at the disciples below, letting out a disdainful snort. Then, his figure flickered and disappeared on the spot. It was evident he was quite dissatisfied with the sect's disciples. Samuel Cross returned to the forest grounds, still immersed in the overwhelming power of the sect master's single strike. At this moment, he had set the sect master as his goal, aspiring to become someone of such stature. Within the sect, there were many like Samuel Cross who were shaken by the sect master's display of power, ensuring it would be a sleepless night for many. At dawn, as Samuel Cross was cultivating amidst the first rays of sunlight, a streak of fiery light suddenly descended from the sky. The fiery light quickly approached and stopped before him. It was a sound transmission talisman. Samuel Cross opened his eyes. It was the sect's official sound transmission talisman. Even an insignificant disciple like him had received one. Could something significant have occurred? Samuel Cross grasped the sound transmission talisman and lightly squeezed it. Immediately, a voice emanated from within. By the sect master's decree, 1 month from now, the Azure Pill sect, 3 Yang sect, 100 Refinement sect, Eam Divine sect, and Jade Void faction will jointly organize the Desolation training at the Desolation battlefield. This is a life and death trial. Those unwilling to participate should leave the sect upon receiving this order. Year, month, day. Desolation battlefield? Samuel Cross muttered as he crushed the sound transmission talisman. He had heard Emily Turner mention it before, a place where low-level disciples slaughtered one another. It seemed the sect master's personality was as unyielding as his sword, leaving no room for weakness. Naturally, Samuel Cross would not leave the sect. He was still considering which cultivation technique to choose after reaching Foundation establishment. Since he had to participate in the trial, it was better to prepare beforehand. Other than his dagger, he had nothing else on him. Just as Samuel Cross was considering which senior uncle to approach for an exit token, a radiant light flashed across the sky. This time, a streak of brilliance flew toward him. Though Samuel Cross had already guessed who it was, he still looked up at the light. As expected, it was Emily Turner. Why was she here again? Emily Turner quickly landed in front of Samuel Cross. Her eyes were red, as though she had just been crying. Samuel Cross, who had intended to greet her with a smile, immediately furrowed his brow upon seeing her expression and asked, "Senior sister, what's wrong?" Emily Turner clenched her teeth and said, "Samuel Cross, I need to ask you for a favor." Samuel Cross nodded and replied, "Go ahead." Over the years, Emily Turner had helped him with many things, and the initial annoyance he felt when they first met had gradually faded. Emily Turner took out a shimmering longsword from her storage pouch and held it out to Samuel Cross, saying, "Kill Marcus White for me." Samuel Cross froze for a moment before gripping the sword tightly. The spiritual energy around him surged uncontrollably. Over the years, his cultivation had not been in vain, and with Selena Fox frequently guiding him, his power had grown considerable. Now, as his full spiritual energy erupted, an imposing aura emanated from him. In a cold voice, he asked, "Where is he?" The moment he heard the surname White, memories of the past flooded his mind, and seeing Emily Turner in tears only deepened his suspicions. Could it be? Emily Turner, who had been gritting her teeth moments earlier, was now stunned by Samuel Cross's menacing demeanor. She had never seen him like this before. The icy aura surrounding him didn't frighten her, instead, it filled her heart with an inexplicable warmth. Suddenly, Emily Turner's face flushed red as she realized why Samuel Cross was reacting this way. She took half a step back, waving her hands hurriedly, "No, no. It's not what you think." Samuel Cross looked at Emily Turner intently. After a long pause, he finally exhaled in relief and said, "As long as it's nothing serious." "But then, why are you asking me to kill someone?" Emily Turner was no longer as angry as she had been when she arrived. She glanced at Samuel Cross, then lowered her head and softly said, "Marcus White is forcing me to marry him." Samuel Cross nodded. This was not unusual. The White family and the Turner family were both prominent cultivation clans. After pondering for a moment, Samuel Cross asked, "You don't want to marry him, so what does your family say?" Emily Turner shook her head and said, "Marcus White once bullied me. I would rather die than marry someone from the White family." "You must kill him." "For me. The family cannot force me to marry a dead man." Samuel Cross frowned. Was she really asking him to kill someone over this? Emily Turner grew a bit anxious. She could tell Samuel Cross was reluctant. However, she also knew her usual spoiled demeanor wouldn't work on him. Gritting her teeth, Emily Turner added, "You've heard the news about the forbidden trial grounds, haven't you? If I find the fragment, it will be a contribution to the family, and they won't be able to force me to marry. Besides, submitting the fragment will also earn a Foundation establishment pill." "A fragment?" Samuel Cross asked, puzzled. Emily Turner explained, "The Forbidden Battlefield is an ancient battleground from long ago, where high-ranking cultivators once fought. Naturally, most of their belongings were scavenged ages ago. However, some fragments of their magical artifacts, damaged and stripped of their power, are harder to detect. Major families collect these fragments for research." Samuel Cross nodded. However, this needle-in-a-haystack task wasn't something he could agree to easily. On the other hand, the Foundation establishment pill was negotiable. He already had the recipe, he was just missing 2 ingredients. Emily Turner added another remark, "The Foundation establishment pill is for you. I just don't want to get married." Samuel Cross shook his head and said, "That's not the issue. If the fragments were so easy to find, your family wouldn't offer a Foundation establishment pill as a reward. Moreover, the trial's information doesn't mention anything about fragments, which shows that people no longer have much hope in their existence or quantity." Emily Turner smiled. She knew that Samuel Cross's response was as good as agreement. She grinned and said, "It's good that you've agreed. I know someone who has information. We'll go together when the time comes." Swish! A cold gleam flashed as Samuel Cross, with just the aura of his sword, cut down a large tree in the distance. Emily Turner thought Samuel Cross was testing his sword and smiled, saying, "This sword may not be as good as the frost crystal blade, but it's no ordinary weapon." She trailed off, noticing Samuel Cross's expression looked off. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 more sword strikes, and 2 more large trees fell. Emily Turner suddenly remembered what had happened yesterday. She immediately drew her frost crystal blade and swung it toward the same direction, slicing down several more trees. Finally, Samuel Cross used a fireball to burn down his wooden hut. The two stood back to back in a clearing. Emily Turner spoke up, "Do we need to leave?" Yesterday, when Samuel Cross had seen a shape-shifting demon, he had left immediately. At the time, she didn't understand, but later realized his decision was correct. If they encountered the same demon now, retreating might again be necessary, right? Samuel Cross shook his head and said, "No need. It has weakened significantly. You should also be able to sense its aura." This demon had taken a strike from the sect leader and still hadn't died. If it hadn't just made a small movement earlier, Samuel Cross might not have even noticed it. Emily Turner immediately calmed her mind to sense. Sure enough, there was a faint aura constantly moving among the trees, unwilling to leave yet hesitant to come closer. Samuel Cross found it somewhat strange. Earlier, while he was cultivating, this spirit creature didn't take the opportunity to attack. Now, with two people here, it started to act peculiarly. Could its unusual behavior be related to Emily Turner? Thinking this, Samuel Cross lowered his voice and said, "Selena, yesterday you noticed that this forest spirit was not simple. Do you know anything specific?" #### Chapter 14, The 14th Turn, A Struggle for Affection. Selena Fox's voice immediately echoed, and she chuckled lightly, "You've figured it out. Indeed, it's because of this young lady. If you ask her to cut her finger and drop a bit of fresh blood, the forest spirit will undoubtedly rush out desperately." Samuel Cross nodded. He pondered for a moment before saying, "Senior sister, put away your weapon and prepare your shield for full defense." Emily Turner was taken aback. She didn't understand but still followed Samuel Cross's instructions, putting away her frost crystal blade and summoning a silver shield. Samuel Cross turned and said, "Extend your finger." Emily Turner looked confused but extended her finger anyway. Samuel Cross used his sword to lightly touch the tip of her finger. A drop of blood immediately formed at the tip. The moment the blood appeared, a shadow suddenly burst out from the forest, rushing straight toward the two of them. Its form was identical to the forest spirit, resembling a newborn baby they had seen the day before. Swish! Samuel Cross swung his sword downward, slicing the forest spirit into two halves. It had indeed weakened significantly. But just as the two were about to breathe a sigh of relief, something astonishing happened. Though the forest spirit had been split in two, it didn't die. Instead, the two halves of its body slowly began merging back together, showing signs of recovery. No wonder the sect leader's single strike couldn't kill it. Samuel Cross's eyes gleamed coldly. Swish! 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 Over 10 sword strikes slashed horizontally and vertically, cutting the forest spirit into countless fragments. Pieces of it scattered across the ground. Yet, to their horror, the fragments continued to squirm and inch closer together, as if preparing to reassemble. What kind of spirit creature was this? Even after being reduced to fragments, it still wouldn't die. Samuel Cross put away his longsword. Spiritual energy flickered in his hand as he summoned a fireball and launched it. He recalled that fireballs had been highly effective against this creature before. Sure enough, the smaller fragments instantly turned to ashes upon contact with the fireball. However, the larger fragments quickly merged together. Although they writhed and struggled within the flames, they showed no signs of vanishing. The power of the fireball dissipated, and the large fragment began to absorb the ashes of the surrounding burned debris, slowly expanding again. Samuel Cross frowned, his 10 fingers glowing as he unleashed 10 consecutive fireballs. This time, the effect was better than the larger fireball. The fragment quickly shrank, eventually becoming only the size of a fingernail. However, this fingernail-sized fragment was unusually stubborn. Its surface was scorched, but it refused to shrink further. Samuel Cross continued to hurl fireballs, but after half a day, he had to stop. He could no longer endure it, the fragment's resilience exceeded his imagination. As soon as Samuel Cross paused, Emily Turner immediately took over. Her cultivation level was slightly higher than his, and her magical power was also more profound. Night fell. Samuel Cross controlled the fireball to burn the fragment while Emily Turner meditated to rest in the distance. She was exhausted as well. Suddenly, the blackened fragment emitted a faint sound. Though slight, it immediately snapped Samuel Cross to attention. It finally reacted. Crack. The fragment split and turned to ash, revealing what was hidden inside, a drop of crystal-clear liquid, as pure as water. What is this? Samuel Cross hesitated whether to stop burning it, but then Selena Fox's voice echoed in his ears, "It's fine now. The forest spirit is dead. This is the mystic wood core from its body, you should collect it. It's a valuable item." Samuel Cross drew the droplet into his hand and said, "Mystic wood core?" The mystic wood core rolled in his palm, resembling a drop of mercury. Selena Fox explained, "Yes. The forest spirit could recover even after being chopped into pieces because of this." Samuel Cross excitedly asked, "If I swallow it, does that mean I can also recover even if I'm split in two?" Selena Fox laughed and replied, "No. You're not a forest spirit. At most, it will help you recover from injuries a bit faster. Its primary purpose is to assist in forming a core. You can use it when you're ready to condense your core." Hearing this, Samuel Cross immediately took out a jade vial, carefully placed the mystic wood core inside, and added several seals to the bottle's mouth. Aiding in core formation, what a treasure! Although he had not yet reached foundation establishment, it would be invaluable later. Just as he finished storing the mystic wood core, a dozen streaks of light suddenly appeared in the sky, moving at incredible speed. In an instant, they reached the forest's edge. Samuel Cross was startled. He recognized the light as coming from his sect. His forest grounds were located on the outskirts of the sect, a place rarely visited. Why were there suddenly so many people here? Emily Turner, who was meditating, sensed something and opened her eyes. Seeing Samuel Cross looking up at the sky, she asked, curiously, "What's wrong?" She also looked up. In midair, over a dozen figures stood on various flying magical artifacts, coldly staring at the two individuals below. Most of them were dressed in black robes with golden trims, while a smaller portion wore long green robes, indicating they were members of the White family and the Turner family who had come seeking them. Samuel Cross suddenly fell silent, drawing his long sword. He could sense the killing intent. Emily Turner exclaimed in surprise, "13th brother, 14th brother, 6th brother, 8th sister, why are all of you here?" "I invited them," a young man, about 23 or 24 years old, spoke arrogantly. "I went to look for you, but you weren't there. I searched all the places you usually go. Worried that something might have happened to you, I asked them to help me search for you." "Humph. Where I go has nothing to do with you," Emily Turner retorted indifferently. Judging by the situation, Samuel Cross had already deduced that this man was Marcus White. Indeed, the young man was Marcus White. Ignoring Emily Turner, he turned his gaze to Samuel Cross and said, "Oh, so it's you. Earlier today, I heard rumors that you and my dear Emily appeared together. I didn't quite believe it. But now..." His tone was hostile, and his eyes revealed a deep resentment. Samuel Cross was someone Marcus had immediately begun investigating upon hearing about him. However, Samuel was elusive, and almost no one had any connections with him. The only trace Marcus found was a record of Samuel's shift changes at the Steward Hall. One thing was certain, Samuel Cross was definitely not from any major cultivation family. Within the country, there was absolutely no cultivation family with the surname Cross. Samuel Cross remained silent. He knew that any words now would be futile. Several members of the White family exchanged glances, retracted their flying artifacts, and descended around Samuel Cross, subtly forming an encirclement. Having followed Marcus White for a long time, they naturally sensed the displeasure in his tone. Emily Turner sensed the tension. Only then did she notice that Samuel Cross was already holding his sword. She immediately shouted at the White family disciples, "What are you all planning to do?" The group didn't respond, merely staring at Samuel Cross. They were members of the White family, not the Turner family. Realizing they were ignoring her, Emily Turner instantly drew her frost crystal blade and declared, "Humph, does anyone here have a flameburst blade? Take it out and let's see." Among the Turner family members, a young man with a kind appearance spoke up, "Sister Turner, put your weapon away." After saying this, he looked at Marcus White, his intention clear: everyone should avoid conflict. Marcus White couldn't disregard the young man's words. Clearing his throat, he said, "What are you all doing?" The group encircling Samuel Cross exchanged glances before one of them replied, "Nothing, we just thought this junior brother looked familiar and wanted to chat a bit." The kind-looking young man said, "Let's go. Everything's fine now, there's no need to linger." With that, he took the lead and left. Naturally, the Turner family members followed. Marcus White gave Samuel Cross a hostile glare and coldly remarked, "Fine, fine." With that, the light beneath his feet flickered, and he soared away on his flying sword. Once Marcus White departed, the other White family members also left. In no time, the area was left with only Samuel Cross and Emily Turner. Emily Turner hesitated slightly. She was well aware of the mindset and actions of those from great cultivation families. Therefore, she clearly understood what the White family intended to do. This made her uneasy. Samuel Cross, looking at the streaks of light flying across the sky, calmly said, "You should go too, don't keep them waiting." Samuel Cross appeared composed, as if he didn't notice the cold tone in Marcus White's voice. Emily Turner hesitated for a moment, before suddenly taking out an object and placing it in Samuel Cross's hand. Then, stepping onto a blue circular disc, she soared into the sky. Only after she left did the streaks of light in the sky resume their original speed, tearing through the air as they disappeared into the distance. It took a while before Samuel Cross lowered his head to look at the item Emily Turner had handed him. It was a pass that allowed free entry and exit from the sect. Samuel Cross smiled. He understood Emily Turner's intention, she wanted him to leave the sect. Whether she wished for him to temporarily avoid danger or to leave permanently was unclear. Coincidentally, Samuel Cross had been planning to go out and purchase some items. He hoped the White family wouldn't target him, as he wished to continue staying in the Azure Pill sect. After all, upon reaching Foundation establishment, one could receive a free cultivation technique, and there were opportunities to assist the senior core formation cultivators with tasks like tending to medicinal gardens. Samuel Cross arrived at the main gate of the Azure Pill sect. While it was possible to leave through other exits, being caught by patrolling disciples could lead to immediate execution. As Samuel Cross was about to take out the pass, his eyes caught sight of a notice board nearby. On it was written, "The Inner-Sect Exchange Gathering at Sword Trial Plateau will be held tonight." An exchange gathering? Samuel Cross paused. Spirit refining disciples required the permission of senior members like martial uncles to leave the sect, so most couldn't come and go freely. As a result, exchange gatherings among disciples were often held within the sect. Samuel Cross had obtained the recipe for the Foundation establishment pill from a senior brother during one such gathering. After some thought, Samuel Cross turned around and headed straight for Sword Trial Plateau. On his way, Samuel Cross pulled out a conical hat and a black cloth to cover his face. During exchange gatherings within the sect, everyone tried to conceal their identities, as many items, like the Foundation establishment pill recipe, were often acquired from martial uncles and couldn't be openly revealed. Anyone interested? Anyone interested? The first 3 layers of the Purity Codex in exchange for a mid-grade or higher magic artifact. Don't miss out. From afar, Samuel Cross heard a loud voice. On Sword Trial Plateau, a small platform had been set up, and someone was currently standing on it, loudly advertising the item in his hand. Get down already. It's my turn. You're only offering 3 layers, where's anyone supposed to find the remaining 6? A burly man with a deep, gruff voice complained. The person on the platform looked displeased but, upon noticing that the burly man was at the peak of the spirit refining stage and had a formidable build, decided not to cause trouble. Reluctantly, he glanced around to confirm no one else was interested in the trade before stepping down dejectedly. ##### Chapter 15, the 15th episode, Mountain Storm approaches, winds fill the tower. No one could recognize who the gruff-voiced man was. This was because he had a clay jar on his head. The jar had 2 small holes cut out for him to see through, explaining his muffled voice. As soon as the man stepped onto the stage, he clasped his hands and addressed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, you must all know that in a month, the absolute trial will take place. I have in my possession a life-saving treasure that can help you escape an enemy encirclement unharmed. After finishing his words, he revealed a rectangular crystal jade box, holding one end of it as he displayed it to everyone. A talisman treasure, someone exclaimed in astonishment. As soon as the words talisman treasure were spoken, the crowd erupted into excitement. Many had only heard of such treasures, but had never seen one before. Witnessing it firsthand today, how could they not be thrilled? The burly man seemed very pleased with the crowd's reaction. After waiting for a moment, he continued, you must all be aware of what a talisman treasure is. It's essentially a talisman that seals a portion of the power of a magical artifact. The item I hold is the Heavenly Will Talisman treasure, capable of unleashing a wide-range attack. Truly, it's a premium specimen among talisman treasures. As soon as the man finished speaking, the previously noisy crowd fell silent. A talisman treasure capable of wide-range attacks? What kind of price would one have to pay to obtain that? Was this guy here just to show off? Among those present, who could possibly bring out something valuable enough to exchange for it? Likely, only members of major cultivation families could afford such an item, but why would they come to such a shabby exchange gathering? The burly man seemed to understand the crowd's thoughts and chuckled, ladies and gentlemen, this talisman treasure only has one use left. That's why I brought it here to trade. I'd like to exchange it for cultivation-enhancing pills, worth at least 1,000 spirit stones. 1,000 spirit stones for pills? 1,000 spirit stones could buy a fairly decent magical weapon. Who would want a talisman treasure that could only be used once? A heavy silence enveloped the scene. The burly man grew increasingly anxious. Seeing the lack of interest from the crowd, he gritted his teeth and said, 800. I'll trade it for pills worth 800 spirit stones. Still, no one responded. The man who had been chased off the stage earlier sneered, brother, there are others waiting their turn. If you're not selling, don't just stand there. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and this was the perfect opportunity. Pills worth 500 spirit stones, do you want to trade? Suddenly, a voice came from the crowd. It was Samuel Cross. He had plenty of pills, having refined a massive batch years ago that he still hadn't used up. The burly man leaped off the stage and landed beside Samuel Cross, saying, how about 600? Brother, this is a treasure that could save your life. Samuel Cross didn't waste words and took out a large medicine jar, handing it over. Using a jar to store pills? This man truly has a unique style. The burly man, though slightly surprised, still accepted the jar, opened the lid to take a quick look, then immediately closed it. He stuffed the glass box in his hand into Samuel Cross's arms and turned to run off. Samuel Cross was stunned, he almost believed the burly man had handed him a fake item. Selena Fox's voice reached Samuel Cross's ears, haha, you gave him the wrong one, that jar is completely full. Samuel Cross froze. Full? While he was feeling puzzled, the burly man with the clay pot on his head suddenly returned and pulled Samuel Cross aside. At this moment, someone else began auctioning on the stage, so no one paid attention to the two of them. The burly man looked around to ensure no one was watching, then suddenly removed the clay pot from his head. Samuel Cross was startled. He recognized this person. It was the same man who had traded him the Foundation Establishment pill recipe last time. But the burly man grinned widely, and his muscular frame suddenly shrank, becoming almost the same size as Samuel Cross. "I am Oliver Grant," the burly man, now a young man, said with a smile to Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross nodded and was about to speak when Oliver Grant shook his head and said, "You are Samuel Cross." Samuel Cross's face changed in shock. How did he figure it out? Oliver Grant sighed and said, "Samuel Cross, you need to leave immediately. Marcus White has secretly issued a bounty, 5,000 spirit stones for your head." This time, Samuel Cross was truly dumbfounded. Oliver Grant continued, "I just received this information, so I came back specifically to warn you." Samuel Cross clasped his hands together and said, "Thank you." He truly didn't know what else to say. Oliver Grant smiled and replied, "No need to thank me. Your jar of medicine is enough for me to break through to the Foundation establishment stage. I should be the one thanking you. This secret bounty placed by Marcus White is his personal decision, not the will of the White family, which is why I dared to come and inform you." After saying this, he took out a high-grade earth prison talisman and continued, "This is a high-grade earth prison talisman. Even a cultivator at the Foundation establishment stage can be restrained for a moment. You must leave quickly." With that, he placed a clay jar on his head and disappeared into the night. Samuel Cross gazed in the direction where Oliver Grant vanished, lost in thought. Selena Fox couldn't help but ask, "Hey, why haven't you left yet?" Samuel Cross furrowed his brows and said, "I don't know if he's telling the truth or lying." Selena Fox asked, "Then what do you plan to do?" Samuel Cross replied, "I still need to go out, even if just to prepare for the desolate battlefield. However, if Marcus White truly has placed a bounty on my head, leaving now would be troublesome. Within the sect, they wouldn't dare to openly act against me, but outside the sect, they might make their move." Selena Fox suggested, "You could change your appearance before going out." After saying this, her face suddenly turned red. She remembered giving Samuel Cross the Celestial Fox elixir years ago, which he seemed to have kept without using. Samuel Cross burst into laughter. While laughing, he took out a jade bottle and said, "I finally have a legitimate reason to take a sip." With that, he opened the bottle, raised it to his lips, and took a gulp. It was smooth as silk, sweet as honey. After drinking the Celestial Fox elixir, Samuel Cross immediately felt his face heat up. Recalling the instructions Selena Fox had told him, he began to imagine his new appearance. After a while, Samuel Cross opened his eyes, and Selena Fox was looking at him. Samuel Cross smiled and asked, "How is it? Does it look convincing?" Selena Fox chuckled, "Yes, very convincing." Samuel Cross had transformed into the likeness of Marcus White. Without needing a travel permit, Samuel Cross boldly walked out of the sect's main gate. The two guards at the gate were somewhat surprised, but neither stopped him. One of them even smiled and said, "Is young Master Min heading out?" This person was also a disciple of the White family. Samuel Cross grunted in response, not bothering to look directly at the disciple. Once Samuel Cross's figure disappeared, the disciple muttered to himself, "Why are young Master Min's attendants nowhere to be seen? And why is he dressed so plainly?" Found him. As Samuel Cross followed the market route Emily Turner had once mentioned, he suddenly heard a startled shout. Then, a fiery signal shot into the sky, exploding in midair. Samuel Cross's expression darkened. It was someone from the White family. How had they found him? In midair, three figures descended together, surrounding Samuel Cross from three directions. One of them was about to speak when he suddenly froze in shock. The other two, upon seeing Samuel Cross's face, exclaimed in unison, "Young Master Marcus." Samuel Cross glanced at the three, coldly snapping, "What's going on? Why are you shouting? I told you to find someone, and now you're surrounding me instead." The one who had initially sent the signal appeared flustered. They had clearly been tracking using the family's sigil, so how did it lead them to their own young master? Whoosh! 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 Several more streaks of light flew over. A voice called out, found him? Where is he? Samuel Cross's expression remained unchanged, but his heart was filled with unease. What's going on? My disguise technique should be flawless. How did they recognize me? Dozens of streaks of light quickly surrounded him. However, upon seeing Samuel Cross's face, all of them looked uncertain and suspicious. Samuel Cross coldly barked, "What are you all standing there for? Spread out. Go find him quickly." A few of them immediately responded and prepared to leave. Suddenly, a thin man casually remarked, "Young master, where are your clothes?" The thin man's words drew everyone's attention back to Samuel Cross. They all doubted his identity because the person before them bore the White family's secret sigil. However, none dared to openly question him. If this truly was the young master, they feared the consequences of speaking out. Now that someone had voiced their doubts, everyone held their breath, waiting to see how the young master would respond. Samuel Cross glared at the thin man and said, Since when do I need to answer to you about my affairs?" The dissatisfaction in Samuel Cross's tone was evident to everyone. Those who had been staring at him immediately stepped back and averted their gazes. They could see clearly that this face indeed belonged to the young master. The thin man, however, did not back down. He smirked and asked, "Young master, where is your flying artifact? Where is your flameburst blade? And, where is your White family token?" Each of the thin man's questions pushed Samuel Cross deeper into anxiety. He regretted choosing to take on Marcus White's appearance. If he had disguised himself as someone else, these people would have torn him apart without hesitation. Realizing he could no longer conceal the truth, Samuel Cross immediately unleashed a burst of golden light. "Watch out! It's the earth prison technique," the thin man shouted as he hastily retreated. The others also quickly backed away, fearing they might be trapped by the spell. A flash of light appeared, and a massive earthen prison materialized before them, with the person bearing the young master's face standing inside. Samuel Cross stared at the thin man and asked, "How did you figure it out? I don't believe you dared to question me just because I wasn't wearing White family attire or carrying the family token." Samuel Cross needed to know the truth, otherwise, he might fall into the same trap again in the future. The skinny man sneered, taking a long pause, before saying, "It doesn't matter if I tell you. You've been tainted by the secret tracking potion of our White family. This potion has no other use but to allow us to locate you within a 10-mile radius." Samuel Cross nodded, understanding the situation. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Can this secret potion be concealed? For instance, by masking its strong scent or setting up a protective barrier?" The skinny man burst into laughter, so much so that he couldn't stand straight. He found the man before him quite amusing, surrounded by more than 10 people, having trapped himself using earth prison technique, and now asking about the secret potion. Someone nearby couldn't help but laugh and replied, "Of course, it can be concealed. The potion dissipates on its own in 7 days, and formations can block its aura. Rest assured, once you're sent to meet the King of Hell, we won't bother chasing you." ##### Chapter 16, Episode 16, Impersonation and Substitution. Everyone burst into laughter. Young Master Min had offered a bounty of 5,000 spirit stones for this man. Though there were many people present, each would still receive a few hundred, a decent reward. None of them believed this man could escape. Each of them had flying artifacts, and half of them were at least at the spirit refining stage level 10. Inside the earthen prison, Samuel Cross suddenly sat cross-legged. A white shadow shot out from his body, stirring up a cloud of dust. The skinny man's eyes flickered as he immediately ordered, "You all, cast the quicksand technique around the earth prison to prevent him from using the earth escape talisman to flee." The group immediately obeyed, respectfully carrying out the command. They landed around the earthen prison and began casting the quicksand technique into the ground. The earth escape technique was a rare spell, and the talismans for it were even rarer. The skinny man was indeed cautious in his actions. Watching the dust rise within the prison, the skinny man pondered briefly before speaking. "Old Kong, Bagua, focus entirely on locking onto the aura of the person inside the earth prison. The rest of you, attack the prison together. As he finished, he was the first to draw out a longsword and directed it to attack the earthen prison. The others followed suit, summoning their artifacts and casting spells. Though the high-grade earth prison talisman was no ordinary item, it could only withstand the full force assault of 6 or 7 cultivators for about half an incense stick's time. As the light of the earth prison began to flicker and weaken, everyone revealed expressions of delight. Their reward was almost in hand. But just at that moment, a powerful surge of magical energy erupted from the crumbling earth prison. Even the dust rising within the prison was swept away by the invisible force. At the center of the earth prison sat Samuel Cross, eyes closed and cross-legged on the ground. Above his head hovered a massive, millstone-like halo. The halo, resembling jade, rotated slowly and emitted waves of divine radiance. Everyone was stunned by this sight. The halo was stunningly beautiful. Someone murmured in awe, "A magical treasure. It's a talisman treasure." The skinny man, possessing sharp insight, immediately recognized it. He abandoned the longsword he had summoned, his figure flashing as he quickly retreated. The others, startled by the skinny man's shout of "talisman treasure," snapped out of their daze and hurriedly backed away as well. Samuel Cross suddenly opened his eyes, coldly glaring at the retreating figures. In a chilling voice, he uttered a single word, "Go." The light wheel, spinning slowly, suddenly expanded, shattering the earth prison. Simultaneously, sharp spikes grew on the surface of the light wheel. In the next instant, these spikes detached from the wheel and shot out in all directions. "Ah, you!" A scream rang out but was abruptly cut off, leaving an eerie silence. Samuel Cross closed his eyes, only reopening them after a long moment. The ground around him looked as though it had just been struck by a hailstorm, covered in countless pits of varying sizes, with broken branches and leaves scattered chaotically. Among this scene of destruction lay over a dozen deformed corpses. Samuel Cross stood up slowly. Activating this talisman had consumed more than half of his spiritual energy. If anyone else came now, he wouldn't be able to hold them off. Hastily collecting all the storage bags from the fallen, Samuel Cross prepared to leave. Before departing, he unleashed countless fireballs in all directions, reducing everything to ashes. Samuel Cross didn't understand formations. But others did, especially within the sect. Important structures in the sect were all protected by formations, such as the alchemy rooms. Samuel Cross was currently in the Inferno pool. He wore the uniform of the White family and was sifting through items scattered on the ground. Although the White family was a prominent cultivation clan, the possessions of these ordinary disciples were rather unimpressive. The best item Samuel Cross had found so far was a mid-grade, lower-tier shield. While the flying artifacts weren't bad, he had none before and now had over 10, he absolutely didn't dare use them after restoring his true appearance. Selena Fox, who had been silently observing, suddenly grabbed a black pearl from the pile of miscellaneous items and said, "Open the Atlas of Mountains and Rivers. I want to plant this inside." Samuel Cross followed her instructions, taking out the Atlas of Mountains and Rivers and opening it. Selena Fox's figure flickered before disappearing into the painting. Inside, she selected a shaded spot near water at the foot of the tallest mountain. Using her claws, she dug a hole and planted the black pearl within. When Selena Fox emerged from the painting, Samuel Cross curiously asked, "What did you plant?" Selena Fox smiled and replied, "I don't know either. I just feel like it resembles something. We'll only know if I guessed correctly once it grows." Samuel Cross nodded and said nothing more. 10 days later, Samuel Cross walked out of the Azure Pale Sect's gates. Wearing a bamboo hat, he followed the rules, presenting his pass and holding up a disciple token from the White family. Of course, this pass wasn't given to him by Emily Turner, he had found it in the storage bags of the White family disciples. Each of them had one, making entry and exit quite simple. Riding on a flying artifact, Samuel Cross felt at ease. Not yet in the foundation establishment stage, yet able to fly, this was only possible with the aid of a flying artifact. Selena Fox peeked out and asked, Samuel Cross, are you planning to leave the Azure Pill sect or continue hiding? Samuel Cross sneered and replied, someone wants my head. I'll have to show them something first. What happens next, I'll deal with later. If not for the unexpected acquisition of a talisman treasure, Samuel Cross would already be awaiting reincarnation. How could he swallow this humiliation? The Market District. This was Samuel Cross's first time visiting the Market District, yet he was surprisingly familiar with the shops. After all, Emily Turner had whispered about them to him more than once. Donning a bamboo hat, Samuel Cross stepped into a shop named Flying Dragon Pavilion. Currently dressed in the attire of the White family, Samuel Cross was immediately greeted by a shop assistant upon entering. Honored customer, what are you looking to purchase? Samuel Cross glanced around briefly. Before responding, I want to buy some premium items. He knew well that the truly valuable goods would never be displayed openly. The shop assistant smiled and said, Oh? Certainly. Please, follow me to the second floor. With that, he gestured invitingly. Without wasting words, Samuel Cross headed straight up the stairs to the second floor. The cultivators browsing on the first floor turned to look at him with envy. Ah, disciples of the White family truly were generous, casually declaring their intent to buy premium items. The second floor, also a shop, was elegantly arranged. The quantity of goods displayed here was less than a third of those on the first floor, but their quality was far superior. A middle-aged man with a round, genial face approached as soon as he saw Samuel Cross. Oh, a friend of the White family. Welcome, welcome. He paid no mind to Samuel Cross's bamboo hat. Among cultivators, eccentric personalities were common, and many preferred to remain inconspicuous. Taking a seat at a nearby table, Samuel Cross spoke directly, I want to buy premium items, artifacts, talismans, anything of high quality. The middle-aged man chuckled. No rush. Our humble store never lacks premium items. Please enjoy a cup of fine tea first. He gestured to a beautiful maid carrying a tea tray. Taking a cup from the tray, he placed it before Samuel Cross, then clasped his hands and walked toward the inner cabinets. Samuel Cross observed his surroundings. After a few glances, he began sipping the tea. The items on the second floor were indeed of much higher quality, but most were mid-tier or above. For someone like him, still in the spirit refining stage, they consumed too much spiritual energy and were entirely impractical. The round-faced shopkeeper soon returned, followed by a shop assistant carrying a large tray. On the tray were several wooden boxes, while the shopkeeper himself carefully held a crystal box. Samuel Cross suddenly stood up upon seeing the crystal box. It turned out to be a talisman treasure. The middle-aged man noticed Samuel Cross's reaction, chuckled briefly, and then said, Oh? My friend, do you recognize this converging fist talisman artifact? Samuel Cross sat back down, shook his head, and replied, I don't recognize it, just a bit surprised. Shopkeeper Carter is really trying to deceive me with such items. After speaking, Samuel Cross removed the conical hat from his head. His earlier surprise had been noticed, so he used this moment to compose himself. The middle-aged man was startled upon seeing Samuel Cross's face under the hat and exclaimed, Oh. So it's young Master White. Young Master White, whatever you desire, just let me know, and this humble shop will deliver it straight to your home. There's no need for you to trouble yourself by coming here personally. The middle-aged man gestured for the shop assistants to leave, then took another glance at Samuel Cross's appearance. Naturally, Samuel Cross wanted him to get a good look, so he picked up a wooden box, opened it, and pretended to examine its contents. After observing for quite some time, the middle-aged man finally smiled wryly and said, Young Master White, every time you visit, you're accompanied by a crowd. It's no surprise I didn't recognize you. These items are indeed refined, but they haven't reached the level of rare treasures. Samuel Cross nodded and said, There are people following me. However, when I arrived at the market, I received news that the person everyone has been searching for seems to have appeared here. So, I sent them out to investigate and happened to pass by your shop, which I couldn't resist entering." The middle-aged man chuckled. This young master had already made headlines across the city by offering a bounty of 5,000 spirit stones for the capture of a cultivator named Samuel Cross. It was unexpected for him to come here in person. The middle-aged man immediately said, "Young Master White, please wait a moment. I'll fetch some rare treasures for you to inspect." With that, he left only the jade pendant Samuel Cross was examining and retrieved all the other items. This time, the middle-aged man personally returned, carrying 2 items in his hands, 1 crystal box and a pair of ordinary-looking boots. Samuel Cross's eyes narrowed as he looked at the crystal box and softly uttered, "Heavenly treasure will talisman artifact." The middle-aged man smiled and placed the 2 items on the table, saying, "Young Master White, you've recognized it. This heavenly treasure will talisman artifact is even more powerful than the azure rainbow sword talisman treasure you acquired last time. As for these boots, they're called Cloud Tower shoes. They are a flying magical artifact with additional abilities for agility and swift movement, making them a rare treasure among rare treasures." Samuel Cross nodded and said, "Good. I'll take both. Also, prepare some high-grade talismans for me, both offensive and defensive." The middle-aged man smiled and replied, "Talismans are no problem." Without leaving the room, he directly retrieved several jade boxes from under a counter, consolidated the talismans into 1 jade box, and placed it in front of Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross looked at the middle-aged man with suspicion and said, "Shopkeeper Carter, you haven't mentioned the prices yet." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "The most expensive is this pair of Cloud Tower shoes, 70,000 spirit stones, no bargaining. The heavenly treasure will talisman artifact is 20,000 spirit stones. As for the jade pendant, it can calm the mind, resist illusions, and even counter low-level illusion arrays. Since you're already taking the other 2 items, I'll discount this one to 8,000 spirit stones. As for the talismans, consider them a gift to accompany your purchase." Chapter 17 Episode 17, Impersonation, 2, Samuel Cross was secretly startled. Impressive, nearly 100,000 spirit stones in an instant. Are these items truly worth it? The middle-aged man continued smiling and asked, "Would young Master White like our shop to deliver these items to your residence, or would you prefer to take them with you now?" Samuel Cross thought for a moment and replied, "Shopkeeper Carter, I don't have enough spirit stones on me. I'll take the items first and send someone to deliver the spirit stones later." The middle-aged man was taken aback. These items were worth nearly 100,000, how could such a thing be said so casually? However, seeing the serious expression on this young Master White's face, he hesitated. Normally, the White family was a major clan and wouldn't stoop to cheating him out of a few spirit stones, but if the other party went back on his word. At that moment, Samuel Cross took out a token and several wooden boxes, pushing them toward the middle-aged man. He spoke nonchalantly, "This is my token. Look, it has my name. These wooden boxes are the real reason I came to the market. They'll serve as collateral for you." The token was something Samuel Cross had found in the storage pouch of a skinny man. It turned out that Marcus White, not wanting Emily Turner to grow suspicious, had handed over his token to the skinny man, instructing him to mobilize personnel from elsewhere to hunt down Samuel Cross. After the skinny man died, the token naturally fell into Samuel Cross's hands. The middle-aged man gritted his teeth and didn't refuse, taking one of the wooden boxes and opening it. A strong medicinal aroma wafted out, revealing a 1,000-year-old 7-star herb. The middle-aged man was stunned for a long moment before opening another box, which also contained a 1,000-year-old herb. These medicinal materials, if exchanged for spirit stones, would only amount to a few thousand, but even paying double the price might not guarantee obtaining them. Now, this young Master White had taken out several of them, dispelling the last bit of doubt in the middle-aged man's mind. Apart from the White family, which had existed in this area for thousands of years, who else could easily produce so many precious medicinal herbs at once? Even his shop didn't have a single herb of this caliber. Leaving the market, Samuel Cross felt incredibly satisfied. He had just saddled the White family with a debt of 98,000 spirit stones. Of course, he had already paid with medicinal herbs worth 10,000 spirit stones. The rest could be left for the White family to deal with. The deadly battlefield. Samuel Cross had been here for several days. Looking around, the area was filled with disciples from various sections. The elders of the sects didn't gather the disciples together but allowed them to roam freely. As long as no major fights broke out, no one cared if they exchanged items or engaged in lofty discussions. At the entrance to the battlefield, there was now a large board listing numerous items, certain pills, magical artifacts, and cultivation techniques. These were all rewards placed in the battlefield by the sects beforehand. Samuel Cross even spotted a talisman treasure. Ever since he first encountered a talisman treasure, they seemed to appear everywhere. Samuel Cross found this somewhat puzzling. Had he simply not noticed them before? Naturally, Samuel Cross also encountered Emily Turner. Emily Turner seemed unconcerned about anything, surrounded by many people, including the genuine Marcus White. Seeing him carefree and at ease, it was clear that the shopkeeper of Flying Dragon Pavilion hadn't yet gone to the White family to demand repayment. Boom! A strange sound echoed. Following the sound, a massive black hole suddenly appeared at the entrance of the deadly battlefield. The black hole slowly rotated, growing larger and larger until it became a vast passageway. On the other side of the passageway, a vast expanse of land could be seen. The desolate battlefield has opened? Samuel Cross was startled, but his gaze immediately shifted to Marcus White. He had come here primarily to settle the score with this young man. The people near the entrance had already surged inside. Very quickly, everyone present began heading towards the entrance, including Emily Turner and the others. Samuel Cross waited until Marcus White had completely entered before gripping his sword and stepping into the pathway. By then, very few people remained outside the entrance. A sudden sensation of the world spinning ensued. Samuel Cross found himself suspended in midair, headfirst toward the ground. The entrance to the desolate battlefield turned out to be a random teleportation array. Regaining his composure, he looked around. A vast, endless grassland stretched out before him, not the desolate scene he had imagined. Flipping himself upright, he landed on the ground, picked up his conical hat, and prepared to put it back on when a voice suddenly called out nearby, "Young master. Are you all right?" Samuel Cross froze, then saw a group of people approaching him. Among them were members of both the White family and the Turner family. However, Emily Turner and Marcus White were not among them. Samuel Cross inwardly groaned. While his appearance was flawless, his mannerisms and demeanor certainly couldn't fully mimic the real Marcus White. Most of these people were from the White family, and he feared he wouldn't be able to keep up the charade. The group moved forward slowly. Among them, a young man in green clothing sighed and said, "This heart-linking talisman isn't entirely reliable after all. A few people didn't get teleported together. Brother White, should we proceed with the plan now?" Samuel Cross was taken aback and asked in surprise, "Plan?" The young man looked at him with slight suspicion and asked, "What's wrong?" Realizing his slip, Samuel Cross quickly shook his head and said, "It's nothing. I'm just a little worried about Emily." The young man laughed and said, "Brother White, don't worry. Emily's frost crystal blade is no less powerful than your flameburst blade. You don't need to be concerned about her safety. For now, we only know that Samuel Cross will come, but we're unsure how Miss Turner plans to contact him. We should focus on finding Miss Turner first." Only then did Samuel Cross recognize this young man. It was the same person who had stopped Emily Turner and the White family members from taking action that day. Samuel Cross was very interested in the plan the young man had mentioned, but he didn't dare ask directly. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Is this information from Brother Turner truly reliable?" The young man laughed and replied, absolutely. Brother White, you've asked this many times already. It took me a lot of effort to extract this information. Miss Turner said that Samuel Cross agreed to come to the desolate battlefield to help her with something. Although we don't know what that is, if Samuel Cross shows up, isn't it a great opportunity for us to act? A cold glint flashed in Samuel Cross's eyes as he smiled and said, oh, then I must truly thank Brother Turner. As he spoke, he suddenly thrust his sword straight into the young man's throat. At that moment, everyone was still moving forward slowly, and no one expected Samuel Cross, disguised as their young master White, to suddenly attack. The young man didn't even have time to react, before Samuel Cross's longsword pierced through his throat. Two young men clutched their throats, where a gaping wound continuously spurted fresh blood. Samuel Cross had already sheathed his sword, coldly staring at the young man. The young man's eyes widened in disbelief, filled with rage and confusion. Even in death, he couldn't comprehend why Samuel Cross had killed him. Thud. The young man collapsed to the ground. Samuel Cross's sword strike had been too swift, too precise. The victim didn't even have a chance to utter a word. Only then did the onlookers react, hurriedly retreating in fear. None of them understood what was happening. Suddenly, Samuel Cross spoke in an icy tone, don't let any of the Turner family escape. As he finished speaking, he swung his sword again, severing the right arm of a man in green standing nearby. Out of nowhere, a disciple of the White family pulled out a magical weapon and attacked a Turner family disciple next to him. Their young master had already killed someone, and regardless of the reason, to prevent exposure, the best course of action was to eliminate all witnesses. This thought quickly spread among the others, and they immediately grasped the situation. The Turner family, already outnumbered by the White family, found themselves in a dire predicament. However, the Turner family wasn't foolish. Realizing the unfavorable situation, they chose not to linger, escaping on flying artifacts and scattering like birds in the wind. In mere moments, only 4 or 5 people remained on the battlefield. A White family disciple cautiously asked, young master, why did you kill someone from the Turner family? Samuel Cross glared at him, and the disciple immediately swallowed his words. Though the others also wanted to question him, one look at Samuel Cross's expression silenced them. Scanning the remaining people, Samuel Cross finally spoke in a calmer tone after a brief pause. This was the Patriarch's command. Samuel Cross is merely a pretext. You don't need to concern yourselves with the details. When you encounter disciples from other families later, tell them the same. The group finally showed expressions of understanding. So, it was the Patriarch's order. No wonder. Another White family disciple asked, then, if we encounter other Turner family members later, should we attack them? Samuel Cross hesitated. Should they strike or not? After pondering for a moment, he replied, I'll use Samuel Cross as an excuse to issue a bounty. How many of you are willing to take action? A young man with a rat-like face grinned and said, young master, your plan is brilliant. We secretly issued this bounty a few days ago. The Turner family, the Chu family, and even the Carter family have expressed willingness to act. Most of their attention has been drawn to this Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross nodded and said, exactly, that's the Patriarch's intention. What we must truly focus on is finding the fragment. As for this Samuel Cross, if you encounter him, not only must you refrain from attacking, but you must also protect him. He's meant to draw attention away from us. If anyone tries to harm Samuel Cross, eliminate them immediately. Whoever finds the fragment will be rewarded with a Foundation establishment pill. And for the one who retrieves the fragment, the reward will be doubled. Samuel Cross declared a sky-high reward, unconcerned since it wasn't coming from his own pocket. The crowd instantly erupted. Foundation establishment pill. These 3 words seemed to have a magical allure. Sects and families naturally possessed Foundation establishment pills, but they were reserved for the most core disciples. Ordinary members could never dream of touching them. Now, however, there was an opportunity, a chance to soar to great heights. The benefits after achieving foundation establishment were indescribable. Treatment within the family would improve drastically, and life within the sect would become carefree. Most importantly, lifespan would be extended, granting a chance to climb to the pinnacle of cultivation. At this moment, those who had been pursuing the disciples of the Turner family returned. Seeing the lively atmosphere, they were somewhat puzzled. Naturally, the others recounted Samuel Cross's earlier words. Instantly, everyone was in an uproar. Still feeling a bit uneasy, Samuel Cross said, "Quickly spread this news to the other family disciples. The purpose of this mission must not go astray." Everyone acknowledged his order in unison and dispersed in all directions. "Hee. You're truly despicable." Selena Fox suddenly appeared, sitting on Samuel Cross's shoulder. Samuel Cross touched his nose and smiled. "Despicable? That word sounds rather pleasant." Chapter 18, Episode 18 Impersonation and Substitution, Part 3. Samuel Cross took out a sound transmission talisman. He spoke into it, saying, "I've arrived," then infused it with magical energy and flung it into the air. The talisman spun once in midair, before darting off in a specific direction. Samuel Cross couldn't locate Marcus White, but he assumed Marcus was likely with Emily Turner. Thus, he sent the sound transmission talisman to Emily Turner. The two of them had exchanged magical energy imprints before. As soon as the talisman found its direction, Samuel Cross's feet glimmered with spiritual light, and he immediately set off in pursuit. Although he couldn't match the talisman's speed, having a direction was enough for him to track them down. After flying for half a day, he suddenly sensed two waves of magical energy fluctuating ahead, as though someone was engaged in combat. Without hesitation, Samuel Cross accelerated. The aura of the magic felt somewhat familiar. Near a lake, a human and a beast were locked in a fierce battle. The human was Marcus White, and the beast was a second-tier emerald-eyed condor. Samuel Cross was thrilled. Though he hadn't found Emily Turner, he had stumbled upon Marcus White first. From a distance, Samuel Cross descended and stood to the side, observing the ongoing fight. Marcus White wielded the flameburst blade, a weapon Samuel had seen before. At this moment, the blade blazed like a fiery torch, heating the surrounding air to the point where even Samuel could feel waves of scorching heat. The emerald-eyed condor, despite facing the flameburst blade, showed no fear. It continuously darted back and forth, and each time its claws or sharp beak struck Marcus White's protective shield, cracks would appear. However, Marcus always managed to parry its attacks with his blade in time. Though the condor appeared ferocious, it avoided direct contact with the flameburst blade. For now, the two were locked in a stalemate. Samuel Cross understood that Marcus White was merely luring the emerald-eyed condor into an ideal position to strike. Otherwise, given Marcus's resources, he could easily summon a defensive artifact to block the beast entirely, preventing it from getting this close. Quietly, Samuel Cross took out an earth prison talisman and activated it discreetly before hurling it forward. Marcus White, fully focused on the condor in front of him, suddenly sensed a surge of magical energy nearby. Without thinking, he pushed off the ground with his foot and leaped several meters to the side. Samuel Cross's earth prison missed its target. "Who's there?" Marcus White coldly shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. At the same time, a flash of spiritual light emanated from his body, causing his ink-colored robe to flutter dramatically. This robe was no ordinary garment, it was a defensive magical artifact. Samuel Cross sighed, clearly unimpressed. The earth-binding talisman he had just used was far too weak. Without saying a word, a flicker of spiritual light appeared in his hand, and a longsword materialized. Without hesitation, he dashed out from the trees, the longsword aimed directly at Marcus White's throat. Marcus White had been vigilant from the start. The moment he saw someone charging at him, he wasted no time. With a swift motion, he swung the flameburst blade in his hand towards Samuel Cross. A dragon fire, as large as a bull, shot straight at him. Marcus's mastery over the flameburst blade far surpassed that of Victor White in the past. Samuel Cross did not expect Marcus White to strike so quickly. He immediately stopped in his tracks and dodged to the side. However, to his surprise, the dragon fire followed his movements as if it had a mind of its own, closing in on him in an instant. Reacting quickly, Samuel pushed off the ground with his foot and leaped into the air. Seeing Samuel Cross's aerial maneuver, Marcus White smirked with delight. His opponent was now suspended in mid-air, making it difficult to change direction, a perfect target. Without hesitation, Marcus channeled all his magical power, summoning 4 or 5 more dragon fires that surged towards Samuel Cross with the intent to incinerate him to ashes. Meanwhile, the emerald-eyed falcon that had been circling earlier had vanished without a trace. Samuel Cross glanced at the approaching dragon fires, a faint smirk playing on his lips. While others might struggle to maneuver mid-air, he possessed the cloud tower shoes. With a firm stomp of his right foot onto the void, a glowing circle of light appeared beneath him, supporting his weight. Standing on the luminous platform, Samuel shifted his stance and suddenly dove toward Marcus White below. Marcus White could never have anticipated that his opponent would be capable of walking on air. Seeing Samuel Cross hurtling toward him, he had no time to react and could only swing his sword horizontally in defense. Clang, the sound of clashing weapons echoed sharply. Following that was a tearing noise. Marcus White's magical robe had been sliced open by Samuel Cross's longsword. Asterisk boom. Boom. Boom, asterisk the dragon fires trailing behind Samuel Cross struck Marcus White directly, engulfing the area in blazing flames. It was unclear what had become of Marcus White. Samuel Cross watched the roaring fire, then glanced down at the longsword in his hand. The weapon, a gift from Emily Turner, was indeed remarkable, not only capable of parrying the flame-burst blade but also easily cutting through protective barriers and tearing apart Marcus White's enchanted robe. Asterisk swish. Swish. Swish, asterisk suddenly, several arrows shot out from the sea of flames, their speed as fast as lightning, aimed at Samuel Cross. He swiftly dodged the projectiles, and moments later, Marcus White emerged from the inferno. Though his robe bore a long tear, the dragon fire seemed to have left him entirely unscathed. Samuel Cross nodded and remarked, "Oh? So dragon fire has no effect on you, does it?" Marcus White swung his longsword and coldly said, "Humph, if you know how to release, naturally you know how to retract. Just a minor trick." But when he got a clear look at Samuel Cross's face, he froze, then exclaimed in surprise, You, who are you?" Samuel Cross smiled and said, "Why don't you guess?" Marcus White stared at Samuel Cross, suddenly realizing, "You are Samuel Cross." Samuel Cross laughed, surprised that Marcus White had figured it out so quickly. Samuel touched his nose and asked, "How did you guess?" Marcus White sneered, "Who else but the reckless Samuel Cross would dare stand against me, Marcus White?" Samuel Cross was about to retort when suddenly, countless iron bars as thick as a thumb emerged from the ground. Beneath Samuel Cross's feet, an iron plate appeared, trapping him inside an iron cage. Marcus White burst into laughter, laughing loudly for a long time before speaking, "Ha, ha, ha. Did you think those arrows were meant to attack you? They were iron spikes. It just takes time to activate them, so I had to chatter with you for a bit. The moment I saw your shoes, I knew who you were." That day, Samuel Cross had used Marcus White's token as collateral at the market. The next day, members of the Flying Dragon Pavilion came to settle the debt. Marcus White's token ended up in the hands of a skinny man, who, along with over a dozen White family disciples, chased after Samuel Cross but never returned. Connecting the dots, the imposter was obvious. However, Marcus White kept this information to himself, ensuring Samuel Cross remained unsuspecting. Samuel Cross asked, "So, Mr. White, what do you plan to do next?" Marcus White chuckled, "I know you have a heavenly treasure will talisman artifact. However, activating it takes quite some time." As he spoke, he sheathed his longsword and pulled out a fiery red talisman. Samuel Cross reached into his storage pouch to retrieve his own talisman. Marcus White laughed again and said, I advise you not to waste your efforts. This iron cage is not only sturdy but also disrupts the flow of spiritual energy. To activate your heavenly treasure will talisman artifact, you'd need at least twice the usual time. With that, Marcus White sat cross-legged, conjuring a defensive shield and beginning to activate the talisman in his hand. Suddenly, Samuel Cross spoke up, "Mr. White, if you want to kill me, you could just call on the White family. Why waste such a precious talisman?" Marcus White ignored him. Samuel Cross was suddenly astonished and exclaimed, "Selena! Why are you here?" Marcus White still had not opened his eyes. Samuel Cross sighed and said, "Brother White, this time you must believe me. The emerald-eyed condor behind you has returned." Marcus White finally couldn't hold back and sneered, "Humph, Samuel Cross, what use is it to delay for a bit? No one can save you now." As the word "you" left his lips, a sudden golden light flashed. He abruptly felt a sharp pain in his chest. Marcus White looked down in disbelief, only to see a large, bowl-sized hole in his chest. The defensive magic shield around his body had been completely ineffective. Marcus White desperately wanted to turn around. He felt that the attacker was still behind him. He tried to twist his head, but before he could fully turn, his body collapsed to the ground, lifeless. He would never know who had struck him down. With Marcus White's death, the iron cage imprisoning Samuel Cross flickered with a bright light and transformed into several arrow-like iron bars clattering to the ground. Samuel Cross heaved a sigh of relief and laughed, "Selena, you're too slow." He had released Selena earlier, intending to use the opportunity to activate the Earth prison to trap Marcus White. Unexpectedly, he himself had been trapped by Marcus White first. Selena Fox suddenly darted out from the side, leaping onto Samuel Cross's shoulder, and said, "It wasn't me. I hadn't even made a move, and he just fell." Samuel Cross was stunned. It wasn't Selena? Then who? He immediately became alert and scanned his surroundings. No need to look anymore, it was I, the great king, who acted. A shrill voice rang out. Following the sound, Samuel Cross looked over and saw 2 second-level spirit beasts flying out from the side. One was the emerald-eyed condor he had encountered earlier, and the other was a golden-eyed condor. How could second-level spirit beasts speak? Could it be that it was a high-level spirit race suppressing its cultivation? Samuel Cross thought for a moment, then took a step back and said, "Oh? Well, truly, I must thank you." At this moment, Selena Fox laughed and said, "So it's a true beast." Who would have thought? In a place with such sparse spiritual energy, there would actually be a true beast. Golden-eyed condor was feeling smug, but the moment it saw Selena Fox, it froze in shock, almost falling out of the sky. Its voice trembled as it said, You. Selena Fox licked her claws and said, "Don't be afraid. I won't eat you." Golden-eyed condor suddenly turned tail and fled, shouting as it flew away, "Little Gray, go wherever you want. With this old fox here, I don't dare stay near him." The last words had barely left its mouth before it disappeared into the horizon. Only then did Samuel Cross have the chance to speak. He asked Selena Fox, "What is a true beast?" Selena Fox replied, "Oh. True beasts are different from demonic beasts. Demonic beasts are quite common, wild beasts can become demons after cultivating for 1,000 years. True beasts, however, are demonic beasts with true spirit bloodlines. They are naturally more gifted than normal demonic beasts, possess longer lifespans, and have astonishing strength." Samuel Cross asked, "Then why did that true beast run away the moment it saw you?" "Could it be that you're also?" Selena Fox smiled. Shaking her small head, she said, "You're confused. Even the most mediocre foundation establishment cultivator can easily kill a talented spirit refining cultivator. The same goes for demonic beasts. That true beast is merely at the 2nd level, not even fully formed yet. How could it dare act arrogantly in front of me?" #### Chapter 19 Episode 19 Impersonation to Seal the World, Part 4. At this moment, the emerald-eyed condor flew in front of Samuel Cross, folded its wings, and landed on the ground, bowing slightly like a human performing a salute. Then it opened its mouth and spat out a small light orb, about the size of a fingertip. Samuel Cross was puzzled. Selena Fox was also a bit surprised, but still explained, "This demonic beast is voluntarily offering a strand of its primordial spirit. It wants to acknowledge you as its master." Samuel Cross was stunned. A demonic beast wanted to recognize him as its master? He was momentarily dazed, but then squatted down and extended his hand. The small light orb fell into Samuel Cross's palm and immediately dissipated. At the same time, he felt a strange sensation.